Hello and welcome to the Agriland studios on the eve of a general election as voters in Ireland get ready to go to the polls tomorrow. We've been out and about across the country talking to politicians about what they're going to deliver if elected for rural voters. But depending on these promises and who gets elected, could this be a make or break election for farmers? Tonight, we're going to hear from some of the leaders of the biggest farmer organisations in the country on what they believe are the key issues that matter most. I'm Frances MacDonald, and joining me in the studio is Elaine Houlihan, President of MACRA, Francie Gorman, President of the Irish Farmers Association, Dennis Drennan, President of the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, Vincent Roddy, President of the Irish Natura and Hill Farmers Association, and Sean McNamara, President of the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association. Now, one of the key messages from across the political divide in the last few weeks is that this election is all about the future of the country. So let's start tonight with a president who represents thousands of young farmers. Elaine, tell us what the key issues are for young farmers and MACRA.
Thank you, Frances. The key issues that we're currently facing as young farmers is, I suppose, around succession, access to land. Our manifesto, we have 3 key asks. We've brought it down to 3. We had 5 in our pre-budget. We're looking for a commitment around succession, so we actually have a future to farm in Ireland like many other generations. We're looking for more supports around farmer mental health, and we are looking for supports around rural housing because we need to live in rural communities to be able to farm.
Okay. And Francie Gorman, the IFA has been promoting this acronym Central, which represents your key asks from politicians. What is that exactly?
Well, essentially, it's about making sure that farmers have a viable future, full stop. We've had a lot of engagement with our politicians over the course of the last 3 weeks. We had a conference in the Curragh where we had the Taoiseach and the Minister for Agriculture in attendance. We had our 3 potential Taoiseach in the Farm Centre last week. And it's about essentially having an income for farmers. We did an analysis on the cost of doing business during the summer, which showed how challenged every sector is. And we've had promises from farmers, from politicians across the spectre, how they're going to support farmers in after this election. But the real proof of it will be when they go to negotiate a programme for government after the election. And I think that's when the real work starts. But we are not going to have the next generation of farmers if we don't support the current generation of farmers that are there.
And Dennis Drennan, the ICMSA has also been talking about income, or rather the lack of it for some farmers. Is that the crux here whenever we talk about what voters need to see from politicians next time round?
Yeah, I think what we need is the government to deliver a timelined government and EU strategy to deliver farm incomes comparable to other sectors. Like if you look at the farm sector, like the volatility is a huge issue, but the actual income is not keeping pace with other sectors, and that's why the next generation are looking. There's far better options out there. We need to see an increased cap budget directed towards the active farmer, not towards land holding. The Nitrates derogation is going to be the difference between a huge number of dairy farmers being viable or non-viable and maybe neighbouring farmers. And like everybody has said, we need farm succession. And 2 of the biggest things that come up from our young farmer forums are income volatility. We need some sort of a tool for income volatility. We've come for the last 7 or 8 years with proposals to sort out that. And also farm regulation has just gone completely out of hand.
And Vincent Roddy, cap budget has been a key issue for the INHFA, hasn't it?
Yeah, indeed, Francis. And we see, I suppose, like everyone else, I'm sure all the other farming organisations, we definitely need to see a substantial increase in this cap programme. We're saying at least 25%. And I think with a budget like that, you can deliver the full convergence because it is going that way. But also you can do that without impact, and you'd expect that every farmer should see an increase on the back of that. And definitely, the cap is where it's at. We also need to ensure, though, that the conditionality in cap is such that it facilitates farmers. Big issue around cap always has been those conditions. And look, we are looking, even in the current cap, we're looking at where GAEC2, which is on peatlands, where that's going to land. And that's definitely going to have an influence going into the future cap programme.
And Sean McNamara, from the ICSA perspective, how important is Mercosur against the backdrop of the general election?
The biggest problem with Mercosur is if it comes in, they're talking about doing a split deal. And if they do a split deal, that means that the Mercosur deal can come in, but we have a chance. Our government parties has a chance to take the EU Commission to court to stop it. And that's what we're looking for. We've asked all MEPs, our ministers, the whole lot. will they do it? None of them has given us an answer yet. The big problem is that beef will come back to 350 a kilo within 18 months. It'll be at 350 a kilo. The Mercosur deal goes ahead and the 90,000 tonnes of beef comes in. Our chicken industry will be gone, and also our grain industry will be gone, because the chicken's we buy in for quarter of what the chicken is here. We no way do we want to see a Mercosur deal coming in, because it's going to destroy farming. We want to see a future for our young farmers. That's the biggest problem. We let this Mercosur deal in, we're talking about future for young farmers. We definitely have no future for young farmers then. So the main thing is we want to keep it out. Like at the moment, cattle is good trade, sheep is good trade. Farmers are just making a viable income, no more. Like I says, the cost of lamb is €7 a kilo to produce, so a farmer is making an average of €23 a lamb. And we say 1,500. It takes 1,500 lambs to make the average industrial wage. It takes 1,500 lambs. I want farmers 1,500 lambs. Now we can talk away, but we want to see young people come into our industry. But the way things are going, it's looking very shaky with both sucklers and especially Mercosur.
Okay, so the issue of young farmers is a key issue that unites all of the farming organisations here tonight. But we had a very strong ministerial portfolio in that we had 3 ministers in the Department of Agriculture last time around. Do you think, Elaine, that department delivered for young farmers?
No.
Francie?
No.
Dennis?
Well, they've waited until the last couple of months of their tenure to deliver in the Succession Commission.
And Roddy, same question to you.
No, I don't believe it did.
And Sean?
No, definitely not. No. Like, all right, they talked about the farm retirement scheme just in the last month, that's it. But apart from that, they never delivered.
Okay, so Dennis, what do you want to see different?
Well, as I said, we've had a couple of young farmer forums within our organisation where every member that was there was an active farmer under 40. Huge turnout at all sessions that we've had. And income volatility is the number one detractor for young people coming in. Young people have to have a mortgage, buy a house, build a house, rent a house, the same as every other young person in society. And they can't go to their bank and say, well, my income might be this or it might be that. It's going to be up, it's going to be down. We need some sort of a measure to sort out the income volatility on farms. We've come with a farm deposit scheme for several times, explained how it would work, how it could be tax compliant. It's almost cost neutral within 3 years to the government, yet they haven't delivered. And also, farm regulation is just gone out of hand completely. I mean, it's regulation on top of regulation on top of regulation, yet no matter, there's no analysis done of whether this regulation is working or not.
Yeah.
How many times have we seen a regulation being removed because it's not effective?
And Francie, you were saying you were talking to the former Taoiseach, Simon Harris. What message did you give to him? Because we've been out and about all over the country. We've been to marts, we've been talking to farmers. We hear what they're saying to us about the fact that some of them are really struggling.
Yeah, so we've made the point about the cost of doing business, first of all, that's eroded any gains that farmers have made over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, particularly in commodity price. Because commodity price isn't that bad, but the cost of doing business is eroded completely. And it's the cost of regulation, it's cost of finance, it's the cost of labour, it's the cost of inputs, the cost of energy. How policy is formulated, the effect that has on the cost of production as well. No analysis done in the last CAP, not good enough. And we've made the point to them that this has to change, and that if they're going to have the next generation of farmers coming through, you've got to be able to provide 2 incomes on farm. And it's not a question of volatility of income, it's actually a question of lack of income. If you had an income, then you can do something about it. But it's a lack of income on an awful lot of farms, and the opportunities that people have outside of farming that gives them a more secure livelihood, a shorter working week, and they're not going to come home and farm and put their life on hold on a whim. And policy over the last 20 years has not supported primary agriculture. And we've made the point continually about CAP that there's got to be 2 budgets. One that delivers environmental ambition, and it has to be an additional budget to the one we have at the moment. And we've got to have an increased budget that supports primary agriculture. And look, if you want activity and you want to maintain your clubs, your pubs, your churches, your schools in rural Ireland, no other industry is going to provide the level of support and financial activity in rural Ireland that farming will provide, and that has been forgotten.
And Vincent Roddy, what else have you been asking politicians to deliver?
Well, definitely on the succession, you're talking succession plus, yeah.
Yeah, but
yeah,
generally across the
generally.
board. Yeah.
Well, just first on succession, obviously we do need to have a farm retirement scheme. Now, we're happy to see that most of the main political parties are talking about a farm succession scheme. So I think farm retirement scheme, should I say. So that needs to be there. We've also talked for young farmers about the reintroduction of an installation. So we're looking at €18,000 for a young farmer. But obviously the other factors for young farmers is that they have to be able, farming, you have to live on the farm. Planning permission is becoming a big issue, and our concern, definitely in some of the more marginal areas, if you call it that, is that planning permission, definitely in peat size and that, may become an issue. And our big concern as we look forward is the nature restoration law and where that is going to play out. And definitely the history from farmers who have operated on designated land, the history there and the feedback from that is not good. It's something that comes up with us all the time. Farmers are very frustrated with the way the designations are handled. And definitely there's a major concern with how the nature restoration law is going to apply. And that is going to have an impact on farmers and young farmers and trying to have planning permission, but trying to farm their land. So that's going to have a big issue.
And Elaine, whenever you're talking to your members, what's the biggest frustration that they have expressed to politicians that have been on their doorstep?
Succession is a massive one, and I suppose the biggest frustration for us right now is we've been banging the succession drum for decades. And to hear the political parties coming out to commit to a retirement scheme seems like they're backing the older farmer once again. Where's the entry into farming? Why isn't there a succession scheme? We have come forward for the last 2 years with a succession scheme to be put on the table. We were told it wasn't possible. And now all of a sudden coming up to election, it's possible as an election promise? Like, we need to see action. Whoever goes into government, we need to see action ASAP. We do not want action in 3 years' time for the cap. If it doesn't happen now, there will be no future in agriculture for us.
Yeah, and one of the other key issues that we have heard from both politicians and from farmers is on the nitrates derogation. And I know that you've referenced this earlier, but Francie, is that a deciding factor, do you believe, whenever we see who comes next into the door?
Oh, it's a huge issue in rural Ireland because it doesn't just affect dairy or livestock farmers, it affects everybody. People in derogation, people in not. And the lads have referenced Sky 2 here in the nature restoration law, how we're being dictated to farmer land. It's all encompassing, and certainly we put an amount of work as an industry, farm organisations together, processors, and got commitments from our main political parties that they will support their attention to derogation. And I mean, that's a huge issue for everybody. The cost of that to rural Ireland it's almost unquantifiable.
Yeah, so Dennis, we have heard from some politicians that they believe perhaps some members of the last government were disingenuous in promising that they could deliver on the nitrates derogation. Have you listened to the arguments on both sides, and are you convinced?
Well, the nitrate derogation is going to be decided by DG Environment in Europe, not by our own politicians. But thankfully, look at this, the tide seems to have turned. That I think that I suppose we would have seen some of the politicians looking at the derogation as a way of culling the national herd from an environmental point of view, from an emissions point of view. But I think it's finally getting home to them that the dairy industry alone is putting about 17 billion into rural Ireland, and there's no replacement for that. If you go down to Balraggan and Kilkenny, where your lawn or based, or you go to Charleville and Cork, or any of those places in rural Ireland where you have milk processing industry and the whole hinterland attached to that, that's supplying the milk to those factories, there's no Google, there's no Facebook, there's no Meta, there's nothing out there. It's agriculture is the driving force and the heartbeat of those rural communities. So I think thankfully at last the politicians seem to begin to understand that this is the heartbeat of rural Ireland. This is what keeps rural Ireland ticking over, and the importance of the derogation. Excuse me, I think it's underestimated. A lot of people don't understand that the majority of people in derogation are not 300 and 400 cow herds. They're small herds, and the difference between having a derogation and not having a derogation is those farmers being viable or non-viable. And if the derogation goes, the number of farms who will suddenly become non-viable because of the cuts to the number of cows they can keep is frightening. And I think that's what really needs to be emphasised, is the importance of it.
And Vincent, whenever you are talking to your members, what's their biggest fear that they're communicating to you? What are they trying to get across to politicians?
I think the big issue for a lot of farmers, obviously, well, at the moment it's acres. That's the one that dominates a lot of discussion. But the one that we set up, and definitely one of the first things we've always had, is this issue around the SSE and SPA designations. And as I said, that is featuring into the concerns around the nature restoration law and where that's going to end up. So that's a big issue. The derogation, to be honest, isn't as big an issue for our farmers. It rarely, if ever, comes up. That's being honest. But definitely the other issue and trying to operate on those peat soils and definitely operating on hill land and trying to make that sustainable and trying to make a living from that is definitely an issue. And there is also a concern with a lot of the farmers that we have environmentalists, if you want to call it that, that are taking a lot of control on how they operate on their land, and we see that definitely operating through acre scheme, where there is a scorecard there, and there's that scorecard definitely on those CP areas in acres is not helpful. But the real concern is that scorecard will be used as we go forward as a baseline. And if you look at that nature restoration law, one of the aspects in it is that habitats cannot regress.
Yeah.
So now they have a scoreline. And if that habitat is deemed to regress, then potentially there's going to be penalties applied to that. So that's a concern.
And Sean, just from an ICSA point of view, you have been talking about payments and problems around payments, and obviously we've had that issue closely linked to acres. Is that something that you think the next government has to get right?
The next government definitely has to get right, for the simple reason the acres isn't good enough. It's a farce of a scheme as far as I'm concerned. Farmers are getting in. A lot of farmers has got nothing in this 2 years going on. At 7,300, which is the most a farmer can get, it's costing them as much. Like I told a certain politician the other night, it's costing as much to get the money, you're spending as much as you're getting. And the farmers, out of 70,300, the farmer pays a planner, does a few bits and pieces, he's nothing left for himself. So it's a pure farce scheme. As far as I'm concerned, the acre scheme should be at least 15, 20,000. It would give a viable income to farmers for the simple reason that have 15 and 20,000 to play with. If they had 10,000 for themselves, it'd be an income. And that's what we see it like. And we see it that way for young people coming along too. They give like a staunch income that you could say if I was going to go for a loan or something, and you 10,000 there that I could pay back a loan or whatever. But that needs to be done. That viable scheme is totally, it's just a total waste of time.
And let me just bring Elaine in here, because young farmers have been telling us that the schemes don't work for them.
No, they don't. And then when you have to pay the advisor, we don't have the money to be paying.
That's one of the key issues, isn't it?
That's one of our massive issues. And that's something that we in Mocker, I suppose, are always bringing to the table. But it seems that we were always falling on deaf ears. Like, we are the minority of the population. We've all seen that here from everybody else, that the young farmers need to be backed. But everybody needs to get behind us to actually get our voice heard, because when we come back to succession, it's a prime example that our buzzword has been succession, and all of a sudden retirement is the only word being used.
Do you feel in this general election some politicians have jumped on that bandwagon?
Yes, absolutely.
And do you feel that they have listened and they're going to deliver, or do you think it's an election vote?
Promise?
Okay, and that's the way it's going to be. Dennis?
Yeah, I think when you speak about schemes, though, Francis, it's gone ridiculous. The number of Mickey Mouse schemes that this department and this government has brought in is off the charts, and none of them realistic. I mean, we're talking about, the government came out at the start and said we're in an environmental and biodiversity crisis. Yet if you look at acres, average payment €6,000. If you look at where our fathers farmed and our mothers farmed 35 years ago, we had Reps 1, average payment £5,000. What was the economic value of £5,000 35 years ago versus €6,000 today? They don't compare. And yet we're deemed to be in an environmental and biodiversity crisis at the moment. And the number of schemes there, the department is creating a rod to beat their own back with the number of schemes. Their IT department can't develop the schemes in time. They can't get the application process in time. They can't inspect them in time, and they can't get the payments in time. What we need is a smaller number of realistic schemes that are of value to both the environment, to the government and to the farmer, and make it simpler for everybody.
Yeah, we spoke to the last three ministers in the Department of Agriculture last week, Minister Hackett, Minister McConnell and Minister Hayden, and all of them had something different to say about acres. But Francie, do you think that was part of the problem?
Acres?
Yeah.
Look, the scheme has been shambolic. It's from an administration point of view unworkable, from a department point of view unpayable, and from a farmer's point of view uncompliable with, in some cases. Payments hugely disappointing, particularly in the cooperation areas. And we've said it, It's not a review, it's a complete overhaul. We need a scheme with measures that are easily quantifiable, that takes the work out of it for both consumer or for consultants and farmers, and can still deliver environmentally. And there's no question, we've a frozen cap budget for the last 20 years. We've been asked to deliver environmental ambition, particularly in the last cap reform. The cost of compliance with the schemes has gone up, and you have the cost incurred, income forgone principle there, which is essentially a cut. And that needs to be changed as well. And it comes back, if they seriously want farmers in Europe to produce food, they're going to have to come forward with a more viable cap budget and deliver environmental ambition in a different budget. And we have produced, we have the best climate, the best land, the best farmers. We have the capital to be able to invest in the business in Europe to produce the best food in the world, which we do. And if we don't produce it somewhere here, it'll be produced somewhere else that will do more environmental damage. And you'll end up in a situation where you could potentially run short of food, and people migrate into Europe now for two things: poverty and starvation.
Yeah, and Fintan, just let me bring you in on that.
Yeah, on acres, I think the first thing we need to recognise as well here is that the scheme that Ireland have in relation to acres, and especially what we're seeing in the CP areas, that was definitely over and above what was ever required. And when we met with the Commission, like we met with them there 2 weeks ago, we met them there last week in back west, they confirmed that. They said that the term they used was that Ireland's agri-environmental scheme, acres, is very ambitious. Okay. Now, look, every farmer will say it's not just very ambitious, it's very unrealistic and definitely unachievable. And look, there's only 3 other countries that have taken on board a results-based model. Germany have one, Slovakia have one, and Spain have one. But those results-based models are nothing like what we have in Ireland. Even in Germany, for example, that they look at and they see if the flowers are there or whatever else, and they're paid a bonus of that. But there isn't that element of penalising them. And the big issue with acres that I see is it's one of the big issues. But when you look at that scorecard, it's not just that we get a credit for what's there; we get penalised as well, and we're often penalised for things that are outside our control, such as invasive species and turbine rights. I mean, we have to look. I mean,
so these are key issues for the next government that's going to be in place.
The key issue, yes, and
they are
acres reviews.
But tonight, whenever we are looking now, so we're going to the polls tomorrow, and we've had politicians say that they will put more money into farmers' pockets. We've heard that up and down the country. But how do you think it's the best way to do that, Elaine?
A succession scheme for young farmers to actually get the young people into farming, because we actually want to farm. Like nobody is asking the young farmer's opinion. We go into conferences, we never hear a young person sitting up there to talk about succession. Nobody wants to hear our fears, our ambitions, our worries. Nobody wants to listen to them. And it's evident that our politicians haven't fully listened to us either when they come out with the term retirement now, when we've been saying succession. Like they need to deliver as well on farmers' mental health and rural housing to actually give us a chance to live in rural Ireland.
Yeah. Sean, how will politicians put more money back into farmers' pockets when they're elected?
Well, we see at the moment that the suckler herd has fallen and the sheep herd. A lot of older farmers, my own age group, is going into it. A lot of young farmers walking away to provide income. We want to see a lot more money going into both sucklers and sheep.
Okay.
And also we want to see the scheme being easier got. The simple reason, when they brought the suckler scheme, the SCEP as we call it, that they got Board Via involved in ICBF, which is no advantage to the suckler farmer. Simple reason is that most of the weanlings, we see it now at the moment, most of the weanlings go for export, good weanlings. Yeah. They're worth a lot more money.
So you want to see money going in to actively support farmers stay in the systems that they're in.
Yes.
And Dennis, from your perspective, what's needed?
I think the problem is that we've all the political parties telling us that they're going to fight for a greater cap budget. But none of them are willing to tell the general public that we're net contributors to the EU at this point in time. And the only way the cap budget can increase is by if the public start putting more money into the cap budget. Like we were in Europe 2 weeks ago at this point in time, and we were campaigning on an increased cap budget, and I'll go back and tell your general public that they have to contribute more. But there's the option to directly fund farming in Ireland without going to Europe and hoping to get the money back.
Yeah, and Francie, when we talk to farmers, they talk to us about the bills that have to be paid, the cost of production. That is an issue, isn't it? And that's what politicians have to address, is it not, in this election?
I think we did that analysis during the summer through our chief economist, Ty Buckley. So for me, the message from politicians is they need to follow through on their promises. in the programme for government. We've got the promises of them. We've got the commitments. Now they need to deliver. They need to deliver in the cost of doing business. And no policy should be implemented at farm level without an analysis of the effect that it's going to have on the cost of doing business, because we do export 90% of what we produce. And I mean, even the most current issue of the whole lot, the Mercosur trade deal, if that's allowed go through, it's going to decimate farming here in Ireland, particularly in the beef and poultry sector. And we've got a commitment from our three potential Taoiseach that they'll oppose that needs to be delivered on with our colleagues in Europe to ensure that doesn't happen. And there's the potential for that to be agreed possibly before the end of the year or early next year.
So Vincent,
Look, I'll be in Brussels tomorrow meeting DG Trade on it, and meeting the farm organisations from around Europe, and it's the key number one issue for us at the moment.
is it basically that money needs to go back into farmers' pockets in order to keep them farming?
We do need that. Definitely, we need an improved CAP budget. I know a lot of people are saying that we need to deliver the environmental budget separate. I'm not convinced of that. I think we can do that inside CAP, because I would be quite concerned that if we start delivering an environmental budget separate, then we'll take land out that is currently available of a CAP budget, and then down the road that land may end up being left.
You don't agree, Dennis? Do you not?
No, I think the piece that's missing here is that politicians at a European level and an Irish level need to be honest with the public and explain to them that the marketplace needs to return the cost of production plus the margin for the farmer. Everybody can see in their households that their ESB bill has gone up, their fuel bill has gone up, petrol for their car has gone up, labour to get anything done around their house has gone up. It's the very same at farm level. So the cost of production has risen. So ultimately it's going to result in a higher price for food. For if people want sustainable, traceable, nutritious food produced in a proper, environmentally friendly way, it comes at a cost, and the farmer can't bear that cost.
Okay. And sorry.
And look, I agree. Definitely, people need to understand, and the government needs to get that point across, that the cost of food, there is a cost to producing food. And I agree with Dennis in the sense that, the costs as well. Like, I mean, we have to look at the costs that have gone up, and I think the carbon tax, definitely that is killing not just farming, that's killing everyone in rural Ireland, and it's definitely impacting rural Ireland more so than it is impacting other areas. So we need to look. I think I'd like to see the carbon tax gone altogether, and there is concerns definitely, and we did highlight that there today or yesterday around concerns with the nature restoration, or if they start applying a carbon tax on those peat soils, what could happen there. But I do think as well that anything can be done within the CAP budget, provided it's big enough. And definitely there needs to be an ambition there to have that budget big enough. And we definitely, I think we're looking still at I think it's 1.1% that's currently being paid.
Okay.
So we need to increase that to 1.3.
So that is an actual negotiating position then for the politicians that come into the Dáil in the next election. But the key issue is, do you trust the politicians that you have been listening to in the run-up to the election to deliver, Sean?
No, the answer is no. Simple reason. I met a couple of them last night, and one party said, the Green Party, they want within 2 years they want to get rid of exports. And the reason we don't want to get rid of exports, we see what's doing the cattle trade at the moment. It's putting a serious lift under the cattle trade. It's putting pressure on the factories, putting pressure on everyone, and no one wants to see live exports stopped.
Okay, so Dennis, do you trust politicians delivering what they've been telling you?
We've met all the main political parties and the leaders. We've expressed our views to them of what needs to be done. They've taken that on board, and it's up to them to deliver. But I mean, if you look at the last government policy that was a signal at the start of their tenure, a lot of it hasn't been delivered.
And Francie, do you expect a more pro-farming government coming out from what you've been hearing this time around?
I'd be hoping so. We put a lot of work into the local and European elections to try and ensure that agriculture was front and central in the campaign. That has been the ambition in this general election campaign. And, whether you trust them or not, it's not really the question. Each party goes in with its own individual manifesto. When the election is over, everything's up for grabs again. So it does come down to the programme for government. And if we can get it into the programme for government, I would expect it will be delivered.
And Vincent?
Yeah, I think it depends on the makeup of the next government. So it depends on who was there, what parties are there. And as Francis said, obviously the programme for government will dictate a lot at that stage, because everyone is promising plenty. But, when they start to negotiate, then We'll see what happens. But that will be down to who is in government and where the compromises are made.
And we've heard a lot, Lynn, from politicians about young farmers and what they want to do for young farmers. But from your perspective and from what your members are telling you, is there an element of confidence there?
There's a glimmer of hope, but we're so used to the gate being closed on us. It's hard to know. It'll really be down to the makeup of the next government, and I suppose the political promises that they have on the table. They need to deliver. It's easy to put something down on paper, but we need delivery more than ever as young people to actually see a future here in Ireland for us.
Okay.
And I think it's important when people go to vote tomorrow that they think very carefully about it, that first of all they go and cast their vote and they genuinely look at parties and candidates that are going to support farming in rural Ireland and vote for those candidates. And crucially, I think those candidates need to be prepared to go into government and be that voice in the room defending rural Ireland. I think that would be my ask of farmers and rural people during Friday.
Okay, so tonight we've heard what the key issues are for farmers and their families and what is needed to keep rural communities alive. Issues which farmers and our panel hope will be high on the agenda for the 174 TDs that will be elected to the 34th Dáil. But for now, I'd like to thank our panel for joining us here in the Agriland studio tonight. Elaine Houlihan, President of MACRA, Francie Gorman, President of the Irish Farmers Association, Dennis Drennan, President of the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, Vincent Roddy, President of the Irish Natura and Hill Farmers Association, and Sean McNamara, President of the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association. Agriland will be following the results of the general election across the weekend, so stay tuned online and on the Agriland app. Goodbye.